Ever heard the phrase, where there's a will, there's a way? Sounds smart, but let's face it, sometimes having the will just isn't enough. What happens when you're motivated, try your hardest, and yet still hit a dead end? What do you do when willpower falls short and you end up feeling stuck? This week on the Spacemakers, we're tackling a big idea that might just change the way you approach problems in life. We're also exploring the groundbreaking science of pathways thinking, also known as way power. Research shows that people who embrace pathways thinking not only perform better academically and shine in competitive sports, but they're also more resilient against depression and more able to handle pain. In other words, pathways thinking may just be the secret to achieving your goals, discovering hope, and finding a way through life's complex problems. So don't just keep pushing harder or trying the same old methods if you feel like you're stuck. Try a new strategy and learn how to do this on this episode of the Spacemakers. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Spacemakers podcast. A podcast or pod course to help you make space to get unstuck for a surprising second act. And I'm here with my one and only co-host, the Gandalf to my Frodo, the Batman to my Robin, the Pamela to my Hasselhoff, the one and only Matt Bain.
Thanks, Dan. That's quite the intro.
It is, yeah. I had to get ChatGPT to help me with that one.
Yeah, I'm still trying to work out. Yeah. Okay, now I got the Pamela to the Hasselhoff. I was going Pamela to Tommy Lee, but that also makes sense. Okay, great. Okay.
But it's good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
And on a serious note, we are talking about how to make space to get unstuck.
Yeah, we are. And before we get there, I just want to say thanks for the text that you sent me during the week as well, saying that you really appreciate doing the podcast.
Good.
Man,
yeah.
that meant so much.
It had heart. It had emojis.
Yeah.
All right. If you missed the reference, go back to last week. All right, so Matt, we've all heard the expression, if at first you don't succeed, try again. Now, it sounds sensible. Trying hard is a good thing. We need grit, we need determination.
Yeah, nothing wrong with a bit of perseverance and persistence.
Perseverance and persistence is a good thing. But what happens if you get stuck in an area of life? Maybe you hit that chiasm, which we talked about in episode 1, where you feel like you're heading in one direction and then suddenly you feel stuck. You don't know the way forward. And what if you actually did give it your best? What if you did have some grit and determination and things just didn't work out the way you expected? What if you changed or the world changed and things didn't work out the way you expected? Or what if you just had some bad luck? Someone kind of screwed you over and things didn't work out your way.
Sounds like that'd be a really discouraging, disheartening, even perhaps hopeless position to find yourself in.
Yeah.
You've given it everything and there's nothing left and you haven't succeeded.
And you're still feeling stuck. Now, I know that that's happened in my life. Definitely not everything has worked out. I'm sure that would be the same with you. So motivation, willpower, kind of grit can get you so far. But when you feel stuck, you need more than that. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Snyder's hope theory. We're going to talk about this idea of way power or pathways thinking and why trying harder isn't always the best way when you're stuck. In fact, sometimes it can just leave you digging a deeper hole.
Yeah, gotcha.
That's what we're talking about today.
Good to know. When those kids in primary school called me a try hard, they were right. It wasn't a good thing. Good to know. So just a brief recap. We've got a framework that we've been going through to help people get unstuck. And we've called it, snappily enough, the shift.
Because we want to help people shift the way they work and get unstuck.
So a super quick summary of what that is again. S stands for select a domain. So again, we've really been pressing people. Just select one area of life that you want to get unstuck in. Not 2, not 3, just 1. And then H, we talked about harnessing your strengths. So that was last episode and the episode before that. So again, that's our trying to kind of combat our natural default to look at our weaknesses and focus on what's not working. Instead, we say, no, look at what your strengths are and what is working in those particular domains where you feel stuck. And today we're looking at I, which is imagine multiple paths. So more on that soon, but very, very excited about where we're going. And then we've got F, which will be next episode, which is forge ahead with action. So again, there's a place of contemplation and reflection, but eventually you've got to do something. Rubber has to meet road. And lastly, we bring it all together with the big T for travel alongside others, because sustainable change is best in company.
That sounds good. And so we always reflect on what we did, because you and I want to get unstuck as well. You know, even in the second episode, we talked about an area where we genuinely feel stuck in life, where we each feel stuck.
Yes.
And so you and I are hoping that this podcast will help us as well.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, we'll just delete all the MP3s and go listen to Huberman. But yeah, Matt, why don't you describe what we asked people to do last week?
Yeah, so we asked people to spend some time, probably around about 5 minutes a day, everyday journaling. And we went, old school pen and paper journaling. And specifically, we wanted people to kind of journal about the area or domain of life where they feel stuck, with hoping to get unstuck. So look at that. But instead, again, of concentrating on what's wrong, we were asking people to focus on what we call like the bright spots. So the exceptions, if you like. So we really stress that even if you think, and it's easy to think generally, these big, huge like generalizations, this is all a mess. If you reflect long enough, you will stumble upon exceptions where within that domain, things have been okay, like good enough. So ask people, identify those exceptions.
And it's the first idea I've thought of this. We talked about the chiasma that, you get into this place where everything is shifting and the way forward is not the way forward, but it's not the way back either. You need a new map and everything's foggy. I like that idea that actually we started really wide and then you actually narrow it down to what's the particular area you most want to shift, even if you feel like there's lots of areas in your life that need to change. And then from there, we're saying, well, what's something that is already working in that domain? I think that hopefully has been a helpful activity, and to write it down.
Yeah, so identify it, like you said, record it, and hopefully that'll build some traction.
So how did you go? You were talking about the fact that you're struggling with, or not just calendar management, but overcommitment and saying yes to people and then letting them down. Yeah. And that being a bit of a pattern. Yeah. Isn't that right? Batman. No, Robin.
Yeah, no, guilty as charged. Yeah, so I journaled and I found, I think the closest thing that I had to a theme, like when it came to a bright spot, was those days where I'd had either intentionally or it just came up as a, like a nice bit of providence. I actually had fat in my day. Yeah. So I try to do time blocking, which obviously you're aware of, and that is where you pretty much give every minute of your working day some kind of job, yeah? And my risk is to fill up every single minute with a hard and fast commitment. And that generally leads to me getting overcommitted because, again, life happens around that. And so the paper plan you have never quite matches the reality of the day. So my bright spot was those couple of days where for some reason or another, I hadn't given every single thing a minute. So I actually had some fat built in.
It's a margin essentially.
It's a margin, yeah.
It's
fat,
like the
it's
idea
a margin.
Of margin and a buffer essentially. If you're driving, you need 2 seconds stopping distance, because if you go closer than 2 seconds, it's not that you don't have a margin. If they break, you crash, right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of saying from a calendar perspective, there hasn't been that buffer or margin in your life.
Yeah, that's just a lot of crashes.
Just a lot of crashes.
Just a lot of rear ending.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So whether it was again intentional that day, I happened just to kind of build in some buffer, or if things were suddenly taken off my calendar for the day, so I was suddenly presented with about 80%. That was so much better. That was just so much better. That was both in terms of how I felt about it, and also the time and attention that I could give the people, particularly the people, all the tasks that I had allocated. Does that make sense?
I love it. That's a great example. How do you reproduce that? That sounds good.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think it is sustainable and reproducible.
And it's not changing everything. It's changing one small thing.
Yeah.
Well, a few small things that will build up over time.
Yeah.
Nice. So mine was about wrestling with kind of the inner life, my religiosity, I suppose you'd say, and the fact that a lot has changed in terms of my own expression of faith and community. What do I do with that, and how do I navigate that? And it's interesting because one of the things I've really wrestled with is, even though I'm kind of taking a step back and doing less than I used to, and giving myself the permission to not be so hard on myself, I suppose, in terms of expressions of faith and practices that don't feel like they're working like they used to. I'm still being quite concerned about my kids because I want to, model the type of values and faith that I want them to have. And I'm in a different place than them. They're young, I'm old. You know what I mean? I'm wrestling with undoing some old beliefs or reframing, but they're building, if that makes sense. And so that's been a real concern and a weight for me. And it's interesting as things turn out, as I was starting to journal and as I was thinking about these things, I had a conversation, I think the night before or day before with a friend. And I was just talking about where I'm at. And they actually asked which I thought was a bit of a bizarre question. They said, do you do anything? Like, do you say grace? Do you say thanks before dinner, essentially? And for me, it was like, that's such a dumb question. Like, of course I say grace. And it was so funny when I reflected on it. I'm like, really what I'm saying is, of course there are bright spots.
Yeah.
And I'm just not focusing on them. I'm focusing on what I'm not doing rather than what I am doing. So when I write stuff down, of course, we say thanks at the dinner table before we eat. I still catch up with my church community in some format most Sundays. I still read the Bible. I pray every day. Like, it's not like I do nothing. I just don't do what I used to do.
Yeah, sure.
And I can really build on that. So that's been helpful to realize, just don't be so stressed.
Yeah.
Things are going to be fine.
Yeah.
And focus more on what you're doing well rather than what you're not doing anymore.
Interesting. So even like you being so aware of strengths, I guess, and also like super aware of how bad is stronger than good, even like despite all that, it was easy for you to kind of like miss those bright spots.
Well, it still is easy. I mean, like we said before, this is a reframing, and you need 6 or 10 positive reinforcements for every one negative. And so I still in my head think, I'm not doing this, and this has changed, and I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
But I also need to consciously practice what I'm journaling.
Yes. Yeah.
And hopefully that'll be a journey.
Yeah.
All right, so Matt, we started with Richard Rohr in one of the seasons, then we went to Powderfinger.
I knew that was a slippery slope.
Yeah, so now we're going to start reading children's books and quoting from kids' books, because this is the quality of our podcast.
Not the quality of our audience.
Not the quality of our audience, maybe you and I. But there's this awesome book called Stuck by Oliver Jeffers, which was one of my favourite books that I read to my children when they were younger, and I think it beautifully describes the problem of doing the same thing again and again with more effort.
Yeah, just trying harder.
Okay, trying harder. So I'm actually going to read the book. For those YouTube watchers, you can actually see the book, but it'll work. So let me start. There's a picture of Floyd, a young boy with a kite, and there's a big tree in the background. It all began when Floyd's kite became stuck in a tree. He tried pulling and swinging, but it wouldn't come unstuck. The trouble really began when he threw his favourite shoe to knock the kite loose, and that got stuck too. Now, I won't keep going, but essentially Floyd then tries to fix the problem of the kite being stuck in the tree by throwing his other shoe to get the other one down, and the shoe gets stuck, and then ends up throwing his cat, and then he throws a lot of different things in the tree. Eventually, he ends up getting a ladder, and he goes up to the tree, and he says, "This will solve the problem." And he throws the ladder up in the tree. And guess what? The ladder gets stuck. And by the end of this book, there's a ridiculous amount of crazy things in the tree, and so much in there that the kite happens to fall out, and he gets his kite back. But, there's like policemen and whales and houses in the tree. But I love the idea that actually, even getting a ladder, he didn't actually use it differently. He just decided, I'll throw it up in the tree. Yeah. And I think that's a great analogy of what it looks like to do the same thing again and again.
You could just, in sub 30 seconds, think of, I think, plenty of examples, whether it's in your own life or someone else's life, where, again, it's just been, if I just persist, if I just persevere, if I just try harder, if I just kind of hang in there, then something is somehow almost magically, that's what it becomes almost superstitious, right? Magically, the result's going to change. And then someone else comes along and says, hey, look, have you ever thought about approaching it, again, same goal, same aim, but just approaching it radically different? It turns out I get there and it's like, oh, wow, I've been stuck in this lane.
Even in business, I find it so hard to know the difference between what you might call a sunk cost, where you're trying a strategy, you hope it works, you pour out lots of time and energy into it. I might release an e-learning course or something that just doesn't sell. When is it a sunk cost and I have to give up the effort and say, okay, I'm not going to dig a hole here, I'm going to dig a hole somewhere else and try different strategies, versus when you just keep pouring more into it, hoping for a different outcome. So it's not necessarily easy to know when it's a strategy problem and when it's a problem of just not having given it enough time. But there definitely comes a point where you have to pull up stumps and think, how could I approach this differently? Certainly throwing up a ladder into the tree was not a good idea. And so we want to talk about the idea of hope theory and how it speaks to this space of not doing the same thing with more effort, but how it teaches us to try a different strategy.
Excellent.
So Matt, we've been talking about whey power and the importance of breaking things down, but we have a different type of whey that we want to talk about in our sponsorship segment, and my words are going to get muddled, but we're going to talk about whey powder in our whey power episode.
Wow, what a segue. Whey power to whey powder.
It's seamless.
From breaking down to building up muscles.
That's right. So tell us about whey powder by Bulk Nutrients.
Yeah, so whey powder, this is a like a product that I regularly use, have done for years. A big fan of it. It's great for someone, I'm sure plenty of people like us and plenty of people in our audience who just have really, really busy lives. So they want to stay fit, they want to train, they want to get their protein up, but again, life is busy. So having a couple of scoops of this bad boy and the other whey products from Bulk is a fantastic way to meet your macro needs, requirements on a day-to-day basis without spending too much time doing it.
It's a great way to get high quality protein at an affordable price. I use Bulk Nutrients products when, I must admit, I've missed lunch and I have to quickly get something into me.
And they're just a great company. So long time OG sponsors of our show, which we very, very much appreciate, and a Tassie-based company that now ship all across Australia.
So if you want to keep practicing your whey power, then maybe you should bulk up with whey powder. I got that out. I'm glad I did. But seriously, if you want to get a 5% discount on protein powders and supplements from Bulk Nutrients, then use our coupon code Spacemakers at bulknutrients.com.au. They're a great company helping us to help you make space using whey powder.
Yeah, good job, Dan. That's the way. All right, Dan, so I would love to hear you give us the guide to hope theory. Like what's that all about? I've heard of optimism, I've heard of hope, I've heard of optimism, I've heard of theory, but I've never heard of hope theory.
I know, it's actually research, so how about that? No, look, so hope theory comes from a guy called Rick Snyder. He was a professor of psychology in the 1990s. He's since passed away, but his research and his theories on hope as a psychological phenomenon have been super, super helpful, at least have helped me and speak directly into this kind of stuckness problem that we're talking about. So, he created, apparently, he called it the Hope Lab. It was like a lab in Kansas. So, I don't know, that sounds a little bit mystical already. But basically, he devoted, I think decades to studying hope, and in particular, what leads to people feeling like they have a sense of hope. So, according to Snyder, if you want to have hope, you need three specific things. You need goal-directed thinking, you need willpower, and you need whey power. He didn't use those terms. He used the term agency thinking and pathways thinking, but essentially it's goal-directed thinking, willpower, and whey power. So let me explain them, and then I think you'll know what it means. You need all three to have hope. So the first thing is you need a goal. Okay, you need goal-directed thinking. Essentially, no one gets to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro accidentally and says, how did I get here? People who set goals, who have a vision for where they're heading, are much more likely to get there. And so what Snyder discovered is to have hope, you need to actually have a vision for a better future. Okay. So if you don't have an imagination of what the future might be, and if that imagination isn't more positive and hopeful than what you have now, well, then it's hard to actually have the feeling and the psychological experience of hope.
An end state or a goal, a destination that is going to be, again, positive, i.e. better than your current state.
Absolutely. The opposite is, I suppose, apathy or just continuing the same old thing. And hope, by its very nature, needs something beyond where you're at now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
But it's not enough to have a goal, and it's not enough to have goal-oriented thinking. You need two other parts to actually experience hope. So the first one is willpower, or what Snyder called agency thinking. And essentially, this is pretty easy to understand. This is grit, tenacity, determination, the internal motivational drive to actually do something to head towards Mount Kilimanjaro. You can have a goal and think about it and imagine it, but if you've got no grit and no internal drive, we might say conscientiousness.
It's a dirty word. It's overrated.
A dirty word in the top five, in the big five, only because I think, what are you in the conscientiousness?
I think it was like bottom 3% or something like that.
So if you're not
conscientious... look what I've done with my life without it.
If you're not conscientious, if you don't have a sense of wanting to do something towards your goals, well, then you won't get there. You'll just feel a lack of hope. So now we're going back to the Batman analogy. I think Alfred says to Bruce Wayne, why do we fall down? So we can learn to pick ourselves up again. So if it's good enough for Batman, it's probably good enough for us. Yep.
Yeah, he was pretty conscientious.
He was pretty conscientious. But even Batman wouldn't have been able to achieve his goals without one other thing, which is what we call way power, or what Snyder called pathways thinking, and that's the magic formula we're going to talk about.
Okay.
And so way power is actually fairly easy to describe. It's the ability to try multiple options or different paths to achieve the same goal. We call it way power because it's about finding a different way. You might have motivation, but if you get a kite stuck in a tree and you throw a shoe at it, and then you throw another shoe at it, and then you throw a cat at it, and then you throw a ladder at it, and then you throw a whale at it, you are using motivation.
Yeah.
But it's probably time to stop and think, do I need a different strategy?
Yeah, that's good. Like, it probably takes a fair bit of discipline and grit to throw a whale, for example. Well, it's true. It's
Unless
like,
you're Batman.
Yeah. So you could be trying super, super, super hard again, and really giving it everything, but at the same time, it's futile.
I mean, it sounds simple, but if you hit a problem in life, most of us do something similar to what we've always done. And so what Snyder found is that there are particular personality types, and you can learn way power. This is the encouraging thing. There are particular personality types where you try something, you hit a roadblock, you don't just give up and you don't try harder. You say, what are 3 other options? And then you try one of those options and that doesn't work. And so you look for a few other options and you try something else. If you continue to try different strategies, eventually something works and you navigate your way around the barriers and issues and challenges that you're facing and you move towards your goal. And so and then you experience hope because you can see that you're actually making tangible, meaningful progress forward towards the thing that you truly desire, rather than, oh my gosh, I'm here again, I've tried hard and nothing works out for me.
So Snyder is like, he's not saying like way power / pathways thinking is enough. He's saying you need that coupled with, again, like that kind of intrinsic motivation and drive and discipline and all that kind of good stuff, as well as having like a well-identified goal.
Absolutely.
Okay, so all 3 are critical.
All 3 are critical. Now, the reason I think way power is so helpful is because I don't think many people know that bit is important, and that's the bit you can really leverage, I think, because it's hard to motivate yourself. In fact, sometimes you motivate yourself by actually taking action. There's plenty of research in that. And you can definitely learn skills to learn pathways thinking. Now, look, the last bit of research I find interesting is people who are high in way power, according to Snyder, they get better grades. They do better they do better in university than people who have high intelligence. Oh. It's interesting. People who are high in pathways thinking and way power, they manage to overcome pain and negative situations more positively than others. They seem to have better interpersonal relationships.
Okay.
They make more money. They're better at elite sports. Like, it really is an amazing skill to be able to constantly look for different options and try new things. But at the end of the day, if you don't remember anything else, as I said, if at first you don't succeed, try a different strategy. So for the rest of the podcast, we want to talk about how can you actually learn the skills of pathways thinking, find a new way, and actually get unstuck if you've been trying 1 or 2 things again and again, and it's time to try a completely different approach to solve your problem. All right, so Matt, look, this is a bit of an experiment, but we talked about the idea of let's take one of our challenges, one of the areas where we feel somewhat stuck in a domain, and go through the hope theory framework, and then we might unroll the theory retrospectively. Does that sound okay? So we'll see if this works, but just maybe talk about, again, briefly, how you feel stuck.
Yeah, so I feel stuck going back to our 5 capitals. I'm stuck in the physical capital, which is both health as well as time. And for me, it's like we talked about before, time. So I feel like I have, and my bent now for years has been to overcommit time-wise. So I'm in this really blessed situation where I've got loads of opportunities, great things being presented to me, both in terms of activities, hobbies, pursuits, hanging out with people. It's almost all good stuff, right? But this is in amongst me working a job, being pretty busy there, being a father, being a husband, all that kind of stuff. So coupled with the fact that I'm innately like a people pleaser, I think so. That's one of my many issues is I find it hard to say no to people. I like people are fun, et cetera, et cetera. So where I find myself is that I end up overcommitting to people and causes, and then when it comes to the actual execution, to be able to follow through with my commitments, they almost end up being lame in the sense that because I'm spread so relatively thin that I don't really give any cause and I don't give some of my relationships actually like what they're due. So I end up like disappointing people.
Yeah, and you double book and you can't turn up to things.
Yeah, that's right. Like that. Yeah, I mean, like on the upside, I think it adds to my allure. So, you know, if you're not there, if you're not there half the time, people go, man, this would have been so much better if Matt was there. Is he going to come next time?
I hear him on the podcast, but I never see him in person.
Yeah. That's right. I've never seen Batman and Matt Bain in the same room.
I mean, yeah. I mean, so Matt, one of the things you've mentioned, and you've also talked about it, you know, off air, is that, like in some ways, it's a simple solution. You need to be better at doing less, filling your calendar up less, and essentially being okay with saying no more regularly. Yeah, is that fair to say?
Yeah. So I think maybe 2 episodes ago, I kind of tried to present it in terms of external and internal factors. So the internal factors are just like getting more comfortable with saying no, you know, and possibly like letting people down or disappointing people at the front end, but at least like doing it in an honourable way, as opposed to like kind of like a slow bleed of not so honourable disappointment. Okay. Yeah. So there's that, and then the external stuff is just as we just talked about. I'm not that conscientious by nature or by temperament, so I could do with more self-discipline, better systems, you know, better adherence to tools and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because you need them because you're not naturally as motivated as other people to do stuff for yourself.
Well, So I guess the thing is I'm pretty motivated to do the things that I want to do in the moment. It's like actually putting together a plan and sticking to it, which I find just by nature restrictive and often boring and predictable.
All right. I mean, I can hear a few things here because one, if you go to the bright spots, the strengths-based stuff, why don't we start there? Is there a bright spot where you've actually said no in advance in an appropriate way to something you would have liked to have done that then gave you the space to be less overcommitted? Can you think of an example?
Yeah, I can. Not so much in recent history, but in 2024, I did. Yeah.
I can think of an example because I asked you to do some more work for me.
Yeah, that's true.
And you said yes, but not until May.
Yeah, that's true.
That was a no, essentially, but not a full no.
It was a no, but.
Yeah, and did that give you a little bit more space because of that?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's a bright spot. I mean, that's one thing. It wasn't a full-on no, but it was like, no, but I can't until this date because that's my commitment. So if I do, I'm overstretched.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's a really good example. Yeah, but that wasn't easy.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So I mean, the thing about way power, right? The first thing I would often do is, firstly think about things that have worked in the past because you want to start with your bright spots, but then come up with a whole lot of different ideas about how you, let's say, could say no or not yet to different situations in a more creative or consistent way. So how have you tried to say no in the past?
Well, there was a time I tried faking my own death, but that didn't work out so well.
People soon
saw through that.
People kept hearing you on the podcast and thought, hang on, he said he was dead.
That sounds way too self-important. So I've tried to go about it by becoming hyper-organised.
Okay.
Right.
So one strategy,
one strategy.
Okay, I get really organised and push hard to do the opposite of my low conscientiousness.
That's right. Right. Yeah. So again, lean on some of my, bend some of my strengths, you know, towards, about gathering information and researching. So like doing that to come up with good systems and finding good people in my life, such as yourself, who can complement me.
Okay, so partnering.
Yeah, partnering. Yep. So that's been useful. Another way that I've started thinking about it and I've tried to implement, but even this is hard, is because it just sounds so precious, as in so self-important, is like just kind of putting a cap on my commitments. So what I should do, like going forward, what I'm trying to do is if I commit for something, it's like it's time bound. So I can do this for the next 12 months. Okay. At the end of 12 months, I'm going to have to reassess.
Yeah, okay. So make sure that whatever you do commit to, it has a finite beginning and end,
Yes.
so that at least there's an out clause if you need it.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Okay.
right. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's a strategy,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
so
that's
this is what
right.
we're looking for
Yeah.
strategies that
Yeah.
you can identify and then reproduce over
Yeah,
time.
yeah. And then another one which has come up in the podcast last season, which is really useful in this context, is a greater yes in order to be able to sustain a smaller no. So I think that's partly saying, well, like in terms of the stuff that I say yes to, and the stuff that I should say no to, like there is some kind of end or goal. Going back to the way power theory behind each of those paths, and I should be clear on where those paths, like what are they actually pursuing.
Okay, that makes sense. So look, I suppose with way power, what we would do is we'd try to brainstorm as many other ideas as possible. So they're the ones that you can identify that you've done already. But you would think, okay, maybe get a piece of paper even, and you say, what are 20 different ways I could say no to consider to help me essentially reduce overcommitment? So yeah, faking your own death, that's a great strategy. There's one, all right, we've got something called, what's something ridiculous, something crazy and absurd that you could do that you're not going to do, but hey, it's worth putting on the list.
You mean in addition to faking my own
Yeah,
death?
something else. Come on, something else. Okay, so there's a strategy. And the aim is to go ridiculous because I want to get things going.
Yeah,
okay?
so look, you could go like thermonuclear, which would be... No, you could. So here's the button. Okay, so this is it. I'm sorry, but I'm tapping out. So from this day on, everything that I've committed to, apart from like being a father and a husband and maybe worker, but everything else is off the table
Okay,
now.
so you put a cap on it. That's exactly what I do.
Yeah, as my reset, hard reset.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I do with business. When I'm truly
Really?
full,
Do you?
I actually say I cannot take any new client until June. Okay, it's not quite thermonuclear,
Yeah,
but
because
I
I'm
basically
saying
say
stuff-
my books are closed, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Whereas I'd be saying I'm resetting, so the stuff that I've said yes to.
Oh, okay, you say no to everyone. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
So you
and-
do a blanket email and say, hi, everyone, I'm
Yeah.
overcommitted.
Yeah.
I've realized that for various reasons, I have
Yeah.
to massively strip back my life, and you're all now blown up.
Yeah.
But that's one strategy. Let's keep throwing up these because we're not committing to these. We're
Yeah.
brainstorming
Yeah,
different ways.
Okay, yeah, good. Yeah, so another idea is taking the stuff that I definitely want to commit to. So the things I've identified that I want to say yes to, and actually like program them in hard and fast. So I'm just thinking like the real life example was we talked about I think last season, me really identifying that I wanted to spend a lot more regular time with particularly old friends. And so like putting together something in our collective diary. So like once a month we have dinner together, and that's kicked on and it's been great. So now it's just part of my, I guess like my kind of like timescape. But I don't think it would happen if I hadn't said, okay, it's going to be at this time, every single blah, blah, blah. So
So you
finding
fill
equivalents of
up
that.
the spaces that
Yes.
matter most. So
Yeah.
you prioritize what truly matters.
Yeah.
And then, you then clearly don't have the space for other things.
Yeah.
Now, look, if you and I were doing a full coaching session, we would spend the hour and you would end up writing down 30 different options for how you might say no.
Okay, yeah.
But this is the beginning of way power, where you actually think about what you've done, where you're heading, what different options are, some crazy options, some different options. You might outsource your no's and get someone else to say them. You might, I don't know, create a funny meme with you in AI that says, I won't be friends with you anymore. I don't know. You just come up with lots of different options. And so you go wide. And then what we do is we eliminate. Okay, maybe we won't do this with you now because of the nature of relationships. But I would say,
It's
hey,
also like hobbies and stuff as well, though. So,
Exactly, yeah, okay.
So I imagine, like, for example, you could say, okay, well, someone may exercise, like, say, like 90 minutes a day. Like, do I really need to exercise 90 minutes a day, or could I like cut that back to, 60, for example?
Exactly. Or I would say, are there other forms of exercise you would enjoy as much that don't take 90 minutes a day and get you the same outcome?
Yeah, or I could bundle.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So the point is you want to brainstorm as many options as possible because otherwise you just see one option. I'm going to throw the shoe at the tree and it's not working, right? And then once you've got it all out laid in front of you, ridiculous options, great options, there are two ways you can then take that information. One is to either combine or eliminate. So combination is, okay, are there any options here that are great, but if I combine them, they'd be even better?
Okay.
Because often we throw up ideas, but when you think about them in combination, you come up with kind of a third synergy, and that increases the pool of options. So that's the combining technique. And the other technique is the elimination question. So if you had to remove the thing that you always do, like your number one go-to, and you couldn't do that anymore, well, then what would you have to do? Now, maybe in your situation, it's not the best question, but in a situation where someone is stuck with a career. And the question could be, well, if you just lost your job and could never work in that industry again, what would you do? You know?
Oh, I
and
see.
so it's about eliminating your current schema.
Yeah.
In the terms of Floyd, it's, hey, Floyd, if you could never throw anything in the tree again, what other options would you have?
I like that.
Okay. So the key is still trying to widen the net and move the spotlight around to get lots of different options.
Mm-hmm.
The final step is choose one and do it.
Okay. So I wonder, when it comes to that idea of elimination, whether a good equivalent scenario or hypothetical for me would be, I wonder what would happen if I just lost a day a week. I approach it that way.
That's a great example. Or even more, I'd go more radical. I'd say, okay, from now on, my 5-day work week, let's say, is now a 3-day work week, and like either the universe changed, or I'm caring for a sick child 2 days a week, or something that truly takes you out of the picture. What would you do? That would be a great thing to brainstorm, because it'll force you to prioritize what truly matters and start to help you work out what's on the cutting floor in that situation. And then often what happens is you'll think, well, why isn't that on the cutting floor now?
Yeah.
And then how can I use these brainstormed options to actually make progress?
So, look, thanks for that. Really, I appreciate it. And that, I know it sounds trite because we're being recorded and this is a podcast, but that really was helpful. So thank you. This is obviously, as in this theory, is pretty new to me. So I think I caught the 3 steps of that. So number 1 being about, brainstorming new options. That made sense to me. Eliminate and combine current options, also like really useful. And then number 3, like do something new, but just particularly to make sure that it's sinking in, both for myself and our listeners and viewers. It'd be great to hear you unpack those 3 steps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you can see the benefit of way power, of trying new strategies and doing new things to get out of old problems, this is the process I'd probably recommend. So the first one is to start by brainstorming options. And by brainstorming options, I want you to try as many as possible. So we are going for quantity, not quality. Okay, because that's the point. When we're definitely not committing to these. So what I would normally suggest is I want you to have at least 20 options. Sometimes I'd say 50 options. The point is to have a ridiculous number of options. So clearly you have to think outside of your schema.
Wow. So I like sit down literally for like one kind of session and I'm just hammering out, brainstorming.
Absolutely. Options. I'm thinking of a particular client from last week, and we talked about a problem, and I said, okay, we are going to brainstorm 30 options. And the first thing they said is, that's a lot. I'm like, that's exactly the point, because you can't get too precious about it.
Okay.
So let's give an example.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can do this with anything, health, finances, whatever. But I put a YouTube video out recently on what I call, tongue-in-cheek romantic productivity. So using way power to help find a date. So
I've seen that. Great sweater.
Great sweater. So let's say you want a date, and rather than just hoping that Mr. Right or Mrs. Right comes along, or maybe without just using a dating app, you actually want to see if you can find strategies to get there. Okay. So, what if, let's say 20 ideas that you could do. So you start with ridiculous stuff. Okay. I could find someone cute in the street and go up and say, hey, can I get your phone number? It might work, but it's ballsy, right? Maybe you could, pay for a sign writer to kind of, write your phone number and say, need a date in the sky. I mean, that's ridiculous. But again, I want you to write stuff down. Put posters everywhere and say, hey, I'm single. I'm looking for Mrs. Right. Okay. But once you get a few ideas off the, on paper, you're off and running.
Yep.
But seriously, what are some strategies to meet people or to get out and to do something new? You could join a silent disco. I mean, give me some ideas, Matt. Come on.
So
we're hypothetical.
Yeah,
obviously.
so you could join a sporting club.
You join a sporting club.
You could take something that you're really interested and passionate about. You'll find some kind of group for that where you find like-minded people.
Exactly.
You could jump into that. You could, you may have friends of friends. So
Tell friends that you're looking for someone. You could start a blog about singles. You could start a singles, quiz night. The point is, if you write enough stuff down, you'll often think, oh yeah, there is stuff I could start to do. Yeah. So the point is to get heaps out there and then look at it. So that's the first step.
And I haven't committed to any of these.
I haven't committed to any of these, of course.
Good.
You're not probably going to go up to random strangers and say, can I have your number? But actually, you might realize that's a really good strategy. If I did that 20 times, I might get a yes. Yeah. And then I get a date. Who knows? So the second step is to eliminate or combine options. And this is really about still brainstorming, but trying to just shift the way in which you brainstorm to get broader options. So one is to combine. So what ideas could you combine in order to make this work? Yes, I could go to a silent disco and then find someone and talk to them. I don't know, etc. Or I could join a sporting club, but also serve, and in the process, be the type of person.
Yeah, I'm not sure we can talk to people at silent disco, so I think I like it.
I think the second one. I'm shooting off the cuff.
Yeah.
But that makes sense. By combining, you can come up with extra options.
Yeah.
And the other one is the elimination option. So imagine that your current strategy is no longer on the table. A classic would be, I've been using dating apps for years, or Tinder is not working for the type of relationships I'm trying to connect with. It's now off the table.
Okay.
You're no longer allowed to use dating apps.
Yeah.
So what options are available to you?
Cool. Okay. And so maybe like going back to my initial list of 30, once I make that call of that elimination, that might actually just automatically discard a bunch of those 30.
Exactly.
Just like that. Okay, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
But particularly eliminate in your mind the things that you currently do.
Okay. So you go
which
to
forces you to try new things.
Gotcha. So no more throwing. No more throwing stuff at the tree.
No more throwing stuff at the tree. Okay.
That's good.
But with all that in mind, now you have a bunch of options. You have pathways to consider. Mm-hmm. The third step, the final step, is choose one. This is where you commit and actually do something new. It doesn't have to be the biggest step. It could be one first step towards something. Let's say silent disco option. Okay, I'm going to research silent discos and put one in my calendar. Now, you might go there, hate silent discos, not meet anyone, but you've tried something, right? You'll learn something from that experience, reflect on what you learnt, and then say, well, that didn't work. But what I did enjoy is going out on a Friday night, and I enjoyed the fact that I had dinner before I went out. So how about I go to dinner with a friend?
Gotcha.
But unless you try something, you won't get the information you need to try another path, and eventually you're likely to experience the goal that you're seeking for. Or you might in the process realize, actually, I don't really need a date. I actually just need to go to Tuscany and start enjoying life and not waiting for Mr. Right, because life is here to live. And I've now built the habits of actually doing stuff. And that's what I really wanted in the first place.
Cool.
So, but that leads exactly, eat, pray, love. That leads to hope. Does that make sense? It leads to hope. It leads to progress. It leads to a sense of movement.
Okay, cool. So, going back to just like do something. So that something could be something from my original list of 30, or it could also be like one of those combinations, like a synthesis that you talked about as well. And if it doesn't work out, if I've heard you right, it's not just a matter of saying, well, it didn't work out, so literally like draw a line through it. It's okay, it didn't work out. But again, almost like looking for the bright spots. Was there anything that I enjoyed about that process, even though overall it didn't work out? Is there something that I can kind of take, and then that's going to modify perhaps my original list of 30 and the next option?
And then you brainstorm more options. And you rinse and repeat. It's not a once-off gig, right?
Good. Yeah, okay.
And we are going to talk about imagine new paths, which is way power, to forge new action. The next episode will be, okay, let's focus on the doing bit.
Yep.
Because you have to do something new in order to get the change.
Yeah.
But all up, hopefully it doesn't feel too complicated. Essentially, it's sit down, brainstorm as many options to solve your problem as you can. If you need to combine or eliminate to get better options, do that. Pick one and do at least one thing differently, and then rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And if you do that regularly, you will develop way power.
Yeah. Like, I'm not sure about you, but I imagine I'm not alone in thinking that sometimes when I commit to an action, it can feel like this is going to be like a lifelong, for better or for worse commitment. And that can be like, you just bring a whole lot of pressure to the table. But it sounds like way power is almost more of just treat this as an experiment, so that just lowers the stakes a little bit, which I think is really healthy.
Yeah. And look, there are personality types, let's say in the Clifton Strengths, like activator, where people do and then they learn, and they do and they learn, and they actually innately pilot and experiment with actions, which I think is the secret to way power. There are others who really like to sit back and think deeply and read and talk and reflect before they do anything. So this does lean into a particular personality type.
Sure.
But at some point, everyone has to act.
Yeah.
And as you do, you'll discover a new way.
Thanks again, Dan. There's a lot there to reflect on. I think now would be a great time just to take, pause for a bit and reflect on both like the theory, just like try to get that all settled in my head, and maybe start to ponder about how you could take away power and apply it to the area where you feel stuck. So let's just take a moment, huh?
All right. So hopefully that was useful. Let's get to the last bit, which is super important. And this is where you do the activity, because it's great theory, but unless you do it, you won't get the benefit. And hope, a sense of movement, And progress comes from widening your net and then doing something about it. So Matt, do you want to explain our pretty simple but important activity for I and the Shift framework, Imagine New Paths?
Yeah, that's great. So here's what we'd like you to do. Book a time in your calendar this week, a 20-minute slot, and book it in a nice space, like a context that you're going to feel like that you just enjoy, you're going to feel pretty relaxed at. And we'd like you to take that 20 minutes and generate 20 options, 20 potential paths that are directly related to that area/domain that you feel stuck in. And like Dan was explaining, what's critical here is you aren't committing to any of these, okay? So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Expect that there's going to be some really left field, completely improbable, even crazy ideas that come out. But again, we're focused on quantity over quality. So that's it, 20 minutes for 20 ideas/paths in a really nice environment that's going to be conducive to that this week.
Look, that sounds great, Matt.
Yeah.
And hey, if our listeners are, come up with some crazy, interesting options, shoot them to us, email us. We're always keen to hear where
that's
people
right.
are
If
at.
anyone out there actually knows how to fake your own death, just saying, asking for a friend.
I know it may not be the strategy worked, it was in the execution. But look, if anyone's interested in knowing more about way power in different contexts, there's a bunch of videos on my YouTube channel. I think that they're in a playlist called Way Power or Pathways Thinking. There's videos about how to find a better career, how to find a date, how to understand the theory in detail. So feel free to have a look at that if you want to dive into this deeper.
Nice.
My channel is @Daniel_SIH if you haven't looked at it yet. But next week we are going to talk about the F,
the big F
in the Shift framework, which, as you mentioned in episode 1, the F is important, otherwise the framework changes dramatically.
It all goes to
something else.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, seriously, that's probably true, because you can pick a domain, you can focus on your strengths, you can come up with all these great ideas for how you can change your life, but unless you do something about it, unless you forge into action, it's actually a bit meaningless. So we're going to talk about strategies to actually get going again if you feel stuck.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this one, but at the same time, I'm also kind of like feeling like a little bit trepidatious, because I think this is going to be the hardest step for a lot of people, myself included.
But also the funnest, because once you start doing something, that's how you make space.
Just again to make sure it's really sunk in, I love that line, that little that quotable moment that you came up with before. Do you want to hit us with that again?
Yeah, sure. So if you remember nothing else, remember this. If at first you don't succeed, don't just try again, but try a different strategy. But until next time, make space.
See ya.